In the modern world, education is seen as the key that opens the door to success. But is it really that simple? We are taught that high grades and prestigious diplomas will determine a bright future. But does that truly reflect the real value of each person, or is it just a complex web of social standards that unintentionally stifles creativity, freedom of thought, and the ability to develop fully? Today's education system may be turning us into learning machines, where creativity is limited and differences are seen as flaws. But deep inside, there is an undiscovered truth. Education is not just about absorbing knowledge, but a process of awakening the mind, challenging prejudices, and reconnecting with our true selves. In this video, we will explore the great deception of modern society about education, things you have never known, hidden corners the system does not want you to see. Get ready to challenge old beliefs and open a new path where education is not just learning, but a journey of inner freedom and authentic growth. Are you ready to completely rethink everything you thought you knew about education? Let's begin. You've likely spent over 16 years in school. Think about that. Nearly 2 decades of your life in classrooms, poring over textbooks, memorizing facts, and chasing grades. But how much of that time was spent teaching you how to think truly, grapple with who you are, or what you want from life? From the start, education felt like a mandate, not a choice. You were handed a roadmap: study hard, follow the rules, ace the tests, and move on. You were told this was the path to success, and you believed it. So, you put in the work. You did the homework, stayed in line, and maybe even excelled. You earned the grades, the diploma, the job, perhaps even the lifestyle that looks perfect on the outside. To the world. You've made it. You're functioning, earning a living, meeting expectations. But when the noise fades and you're alone with your thoughts, something feels off. A quiet question creeps in, one that school never prepared you for. Who am I? What do I really want? Why do I feel so disconnected, even when I've done everything right? This isn't just you. A 2021 Pew Research Center survey revealed that over 60% of US adults, many highly educated, have questioned their life's purpose. This isn't a personal failure, it's a sign of a deeper flaw in the system itself. Modern education wasn't built to help you know yourself. Its origins lie in the Industrial Revolution, designed to produce workers who could fit neatly into a system, not to nurture self-aware, reflective individuals. Behind the lessons, exams, and degrees lies a subtle blueprint to create workers, not thinkers, to foster obedience, not insight, to reward repetition, not introspection. You were taught to memorize answers, not to ask questions. You learned to conform to expectations, not to explore your inner world. The result: you might be successful by society's standards, a good job, a stable life, but still feel like a stranger in your own skin, emotionally adrift or disconnected from your core self. Why does this happen? Because the system never taught you to look inward. You were trained to perform, to check boxes, meet deadlines, and fulfill roles, but not to make sense of the world or your place in it. You weren't encouraged to ask the big questions, to sit with discomfort, or to uncover who you really are. The cost of this education is steep. It equips you to play a part, but leaves you unsure if that part is even yours. It teaches you how to succeed in others' eyes, but not how to define success for yourself. This disconnect shows up in subtle ways. You might feel restless, even when life seems fine. You might excel at work, but dread the grind because it doesn't align with your values. You might have a busy social life, but feel lonely in shallow connections. A 2023 Gallup study found that nearly 70% of Americans feel disengaged at work, even those with advanced degrees. This isn't just about jobs, it's about a life misaligned with who you are. A gap education never taught you to bridge. So, what now? The good news is, you can start reclaiming your sense of self. It begins with pausing, creating space to reflect without distractions. Try journaling. Write down your fears, dreams, and what sparks joy when no one's watching. Question the path you're on. Are you chasing goals because they're yours, or because they're what you were told to want? Embrace this. Where growth happens, seek new experiences, travel, hobbies, or conversations with people who challenge your worldview. Connect with others who value authenticity over achievement. These steps won't give you all the answers, but they'll help you start asking the right questions. The education system may not have taught you how to know yourself, but you can learn you can redefine success to reflect who you are, not just what you do. Imagine a life where your work, relationships, and choices feel like they belong to you. That life is possible. It starts with daring to ask, what do I really want? When the applause fades, when the checklist is complete, when the next step no longer feels obvious, the silence creeps in. That quiet voice you've ignored for years begins to whisper, is this really me? Is this what I wanted? Or is this just who I was told to become? This isn't just about school. It's about how education shaped your sense of self. It's about the way a system trained you to look outward for answers, for approval, for identity, while your inner world remained unexplored. And now, as an adult, you're left piecing it together, searching for meaning in a life that was never built on understanding, only on achievement. That is the great deception. Not that education failed, but that it never intended to help you find yourself in the first place. Somewhere along the way, something changed. Education, which could have been a journey of discovery, slowly became a system of control. What began as a natural instinct, the desire to explore, to ask questions, to understand, was reshaped into something mechanical. You started school with curiosity. You asked questions. You wandered off topic. You wanted to know why, but the system wasn't built for that. It wasn't designed to nourish your inner spark. It was designed to measure, standardize, and evaluate, to turn a living mind into a manageable product. So, little by little, the wonder faded. You stopped asking why, not because you lost interest, but because you learned that too many questions made you a problem. You remember being told you were disruptive for wanting to know more, that raising your hand too often was annoying, that asking questions outside the textbook meant you weren't on track. And over time, you adjusted. You gave the answers they wanted. You memorized the right information. You stayed inside the lines. You learned that it was safer to follow than to challenge, easier to absorb than to explore. You began to associate learning with pressure, anxiety, and performance. You didn't read because you were curious. You read because you were tested. You didn't write to express, you wrote to fit a rubric. You stopped thinking to understand and started thinking to comply. And the more you adapted to the system, the more you lost touch with the part of you that once loved learning for its own sake. You learned to perform, not to pursue, to repeat, not to reflect, to pass exams, not to expand your mind. And the most dangerous part, you were praised for it. You were told you were a good student, not because you thought for yourself, but because you didn't make trouble. You followed instructions. You didn't question authority. You did exactly what was expected. But what does that really mean? If education rewards obedience over originality, what kind of intelligence is it really cultivating? Krishnamurti once said, real education means awakening the capacity to think for oneself. But thinking for yourself is not convenient for a system built on conformity. Independent minds challenge the script. They don't fit easily into standardized tests. They don't follow one-size-fits-all schedules. So, instead of awakening thought, the system teaches imitation. Instead of nurturing questions, it drills answers. The result is a kind of quiet flattening of the human spirit, a slow erosion of what makes each person unique. The child who once asked bold questions becomes the adult who fears being wrong. The teenager who once challenged authority becomes the professional who never questions the company policy. The learner becomes the follower, and the system calls that success. But is it really success if it costs us our curiosity? Is it really growth if it numbs the desire to know, to explore, to create? When you look back, how much of your education was truly yours? How much of it felt alive, connected to your passions, your questions, your path? And how much of it was simply compliance, an endless loop of assignments, scores, and silent pressure? The tragedy isn't that we learned facts, it's that we stopped asking what they meant, that we were taught how to answer, but not how to wonder, that the joy of discovery was replaced by the fear of getting it wrong. Education became less about igniting the mind and more about managing the output, less about awakening and more about obedience. And now, many of us carry that conditioning into adulthood, still afraid to ask too many questions, still waiting for permission, still measuring our worth by how well we perform instead of how deeply we think. But maybe it's time to unlearn what was imposed. Maybe the first step to reclaiming our minds is not to learn more, but to remember what we once knew. That real education begins the moment we stop repeating and start thinking for ourselves. But To understand how we got here, how education shifted from exploration to obedience, we have to look deeper. This wasn't an accident. The structure of modern education didn't just appear one day. It was carefully built, shaped by the needs of a very specific kind of world, one that prioritized order, productivity, and control. The origins of the school system as we know it are not rooted in a desire to cultivate free thinkers. They are rooted in the industrial age, a time when governments and factories needed disciplined, predictable workers, not poets, not philosophers, not visionaries, but people who could follow instructions, meet quotas, and operate within rigid hierarchies. And so, schools were modeled accordingly. Look closely, and the parallels are striking. A bell rings to start the day. You sit in rows. You follow a schedule divided by subjects, just like shifts in a factory. You move from one task to the next on command. You are rewarded for compliance. You are penalized for deviation. Creativity becomes secondary. Conformity becomes sacred. Ivan Illich, in Deschooling Society, called it out plainly. School is the new church. Its dogma is conformity. And he was right. The system doesn't just teach information. It teaches belief in structure, in hierarchy, in the idea that success means following the rules set by someone else, that your worth is determined by how well you fit the mold, not how bravely you break it. This wasn't always the case. Learning, in its purest form, has always been about liberation, about opening the mind to possibilities, about challenging assumptions, not memorizing them. But when education became institutionalized, when it was tied to economies and state interests, it stopped being about growth and started being about management. Think about it. The classroom teaches more than just math or history. It teaches punctuality, obedience, deference to authority. It teaches you not just what to know, but how to behave. And the message is clear. Stay in line. Don't question the system. Keep your head down and you'll be rewarded. And for a long time, that model worked for society. It created generations of workers who knew how to follow procedures, meet deadlines, and sustain the machinery of production. But what it didn't do was create people who knew how to live deeply, to think critically, or to define meaning on their own terms. The tragedy is that this system became invisible. We stopped seeing it as a design and started accepting it as the natural way of things. We forgot that education could be different, that it didn't have to feel like a slow erasure of individuality, that it wasn't meant to feel like a job you start at age 5 and retire from at 2 to dot. And so, we grew up inside a structure that quietly trained us to seek permission, to wait for approval, to fear mistakes, to trust institutions more than our own intuition. It shaped our minds before we knew we had minds to shape. It told us what to value before we had the chance to decide for ourselves. And most of us never thought to question it, because questioning was never part of the lesson plan. This is the silent history of modern education, not a path to self-discovery, but a program of social conditioning, not a celebration of the human spirit, but a system of behavioral engineering. And until we recognize that, we'll keep mistaking training for wisdom, compliance for growth, and structure for truth. And what happens after we leave that system, after years of being trained to meet expectations, follow schedules, and succeed by external standards? What kind of adults do we become? Many of us walk into the real world carrying degrees, certificates, impressive resumes. On paper, we look prepared. We're educated, qualified, ready. But inside, something's missing. We know how to solve equations, write reports, manage deadlines. But when life throws something unexpected or do something personal, messy, and deeply human, we freeze. Because nobody taught us how to navigate the storms that don't come with instructions. No one showed us how to make decisions rooted in self-knowledge. No one prepared us to sit with uncertainty or to ask, what do I really want from this life? And so, when the structure disappears, when we're no longer graded, no longer told what to do, we feel lost, disoriented, empty. It's a feeling more common than we think. You can have a stable job, a solid income, even recognition from others, but then something breaks, divorce, a layoff, a death in the family, and suddenly all those years of achievement feel like they didn't prepare you for anything that truly matters. You realize you were educated to perform, but never to reflect, trained to succeed, but never to feel, taught to plan, but never to understand who's doing the planning in the first place. Psychology Today reported in 2020 that many adults experience high levels of anxiety when facing personal decisions, precisely because they were conditioned to follow guidance from others, not because they're incapable of choosing, but because they were never taught how. For so long, someone else made the choices what to study, what's considered success, what path to follow. And even now, as adults, we often carry that same habit into our lives, seeking permission, approval, certainty from outside ourselves. We confuse our accomplishments with self-knowledge, but the truth is, you can have a master's degree and still not know what brings you peace. You can earn awards and still feel directionless. You can be praised for your discipline, your work ethic, your ambition, and still wake up one day wondering whose life you're actually living. The system taught you how to chase goals, but it never asked you if those goals were your own. And so, we move through life like actors playing a role. We hit milestones, check boxes, build careers, but in the quiet moments, when no one's watching, we sense the truth that we're strangers to ourselves, that we've been climbing ladders that lean against the wrong walls, that success without understanding is just another mask. This isn't just a personal issue, it's a psychological consequence of being raised in a system that never prioritized self-inquiry, a system that rewarded right answers but discouraged real questions, that prized productivity over presence, that cared more about grades than about growth. And the impact is real, not just emotionally, but existentially. We struggle with identity, purpose, direction, not because we're broken, but because we were never shown how to look inward. No test ever asked, "What do you love?" No curriculum ever taught, "How do you deal with grief?" No school ever gave you credit for learning how to forgive yourself. But these are the lessons that shape us. These are the truths that anchor us when life gets hard. And without them, we drift but unsure, accomplished but unfulfilled. This is the shadow side of modern education, not its failure to deliver knowledge, but its failure to guide us toward wisdom. Not its lack of structure, but its lack of soul. And unless we face that truth, we'll keep mistaking performance for purpose and wonder silently why we still feel so empty. At some point, if you're lucky, or maybe if life pushes you hard enough, you begin to notice something unsettling. A quiet realization starts to take shape, that what you believe about yourself, about success, about what makes life meaningful, might not be entirely your own. It feels like waking up from a dream you didn't know you were having, like looking at your life and realizing it's been shaped not by conscious choice, but by unconscious programming. Because education didn't just teach you facts, it taught you how to think, or, more accurately, what not to question. It handed you a script about what's valuable, what's respectable, what's acceptable, and over time, that script became invisible. It became your inner voice, your default. The system didn't just train you to perform, it trained you to believe, and those beliefs run deeper than you realize. You may not remember the moment it happened, but you started to fear being too different. You learned to avoid standing out. You started measuring your worth by how well you fit in. And now, even as an adult, there's still that discomfort when someone challenges the norm, when someone lives in a way that doesn't follow the plan. A quiet voice inside you whispers, "That's risky. That's strange. That's not how things are done." You might feel uneasy without a schedule, lost when there's no one telling you what the next step should be. You might succeed in every way society tells you matters: status, income, recognition, yet feel strangely disconnected from yourself, like you're playing a role that was written long before you knew who you were. And that's not your fault. It's the result of years, decades, of conditioning that equates obedience with intelligence, routine with safety, productivity with worth. We weren't just taught what to know, we were taught what to fear. We were taught to be suspicious of stillness, of uncertainty, of anything that didn't come with external validation. Krishnamurti once said, "It is no sign of intelligence to adapt to a deeply sick society." And yet, adaptation is exactly what we were praised for. We were told that fitting in was a sign of maturity, that questioning the system was rebellion, that success meant aligning ourselves with values we never paused to examine. And in doing so, we learned to suppress the parts of us that didn't conform: the questions, the instincts, the creative impulses. But now, the cracks are showing. You start to see the limits of the beliefs you've inherited. You notice how often your decisions are driven by fear of judgment, not by inner truth. How your self-worth fluctuates with productivity. how rest feels guilty, how saying, "I don't know," feels like failure. These are not natural reactions. They're learned patterns, programmed responses to a system that rewarded control over curiosity and silence over self-expression. And the first step in breaking free isn't to change everything overnight. It's simply to notice, to question the unquestioned, to ask, where did this belief come from? Who benefits from it? And does it still serve me? Because until you recognize the programming, you're still living inside it, still operating within a framework designed not to help you thrive, but to keep you aligned with an outdated model of life. This is the beginning of awakening, not a dramatic moment of rebellion, but a quiet return to yourself, a recognition that so many of the limits you live with aren't real. They were taught that your discomfort with freedom isn't a flaw, it's a result of being trained to fear it. And once you see that, you can begin to unlearn, to rebuild, to remember who you were before you were told who to be. Once you begin to see the programming, the subtle ways society, schools, and systems have shaped your thoughts and choices, something inside you shifts. It's like waking from a dream you didn't know you were in. You realize the real work ahead isn't about fixing yourself, it's about reclaiming yourself. It's not about becoming someone new, but rediscovering who you were before the world told you who to be. This journey, though quiet and deeply personal, is nothing short of revolutionary. It's a rebellion against a life of autopilot, a refusal to live by someone else's script. This awakening changes how you approach learning. You no longer want to memorize facts you'll forget or chase grades for validation. Instead, you crave understanding, ideas that spark something deep within, that stir your soul and challenge your assumptions. You want to read, not to pass a test, but to feed a curiosity that's been dormant too long. You want to write, not to meet a rubric, but to give voice to the chaos and clarity within you, to make sense of your own heart. Learning stops being about achievement. It becomes about living more fully, more authentically, as yourself. This is the start of a different kind of education, one that doesn't begin in a classroom, but in the questions you're finally brave enough to ask. What do I truly believe? Why do I believe it? Are these values mine, or were they handed to me by family, institutions, or society's expectations? What kind of life feels true to me, not just acceptable to others? These questions are the seeds of transformation. They're not easy, and they don't come with tidy answers, but they mark the beginning of dismantling the invisible cage you've been living in, a cage built from routines, rules, and roles you never chose. As you walk this path, you start to let go of old fears. You stop dreading the blank spaces in your calendar, those moments of unstructured time that once felt unsettling. You stop needing constant productivity to prove your worth. You learn to sit with silence, to tolerate the unknown, to embrace uncertainty as a space for growth. In that quiet, something deeper emerges, something that's been waiting for your attention all along. Your true self, unfiltered by the expectations of others. According to a 2023 study by the American Psychological Association, people who practice regular self-reflection report higher levels of life satisfaction and emotional clarity. This isn't just navel-gazing, it's a deliberate act of reclaiming your inner compass. This journey isn't just for you, it ripples outward. If you're a parent, teacher, or leader, you start to question how you influence others. Are you teaching children to obey or to ask? Are you preparing students for tests or for self-discovery? Are you praising compliance or courage? Real education isn't about molding people to fit a system. It's about empowering them to shape their own lives. It's not about teaching them to play a role, but encouraging them to question whether that role is worth playing. It's about fostering independent thought, even if it leads them down paths others don't understand. This kind of education doesn't require a degree or a classroom. It begins with honesty, intention, and a willingness to face yourself. It grows in the books you choose, not because they're assigned, but because they challenge you. It flourishes in the words you write as you wrestle with your thoughts and dreams. It deepens in the way you listen to others, to yourself, to the quiet nudges of intuition. It's built through the questions you stop avoiding and the truths you choose over comfort, again and again. The beauty of this self-education is that it's not a rehearsal for life, it is life. It's what happens when you start living as yourself, not as a role, a product, or a projection of other people's hopes and fears. It's about remembering how to feel deeply, how to wander freely, How to Choose Boldly. A 2022 Gallup poll found that individuals who prioritize personal growth over external validation are 40% more likely to report a sense of purpose. This is the reward of unlearning programming, a life that feels like it belongs to you. Perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this: you were never meant to just fit in. You were meant to wake up, to unlearn the rules that don't serve you, to return to the person you were before the world told you who to be. This journey isn't about perfection, it's about presence. It's about choosing to live with intention, to ask the hard questions, to embrace the uncertainty of becoming. And in that choice, you don't just find yourself, you create a life that's truly yours, one brave, honest step at a time. What did you think about today's video? In your opinion, has our education system long been off track? If you were given the chance to suggest changes, what directions would you propose? Feel free to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If this video opened your mind or helped you see reality in a new light, don't forget to like and subscribe to Top Hidden Knowledge so you never miss our next deep dive into mystery, perception, and the hidden workings of our universe. And if you have time, explore more videos on our channel. We're just getting started. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and never stop questioning the world around you.